Cold. It'll get up to the high 70s today. Cheryl, what's it like up in Colombia?
It's 37 degrees right now.
Whoa.
And there was a
That's
threat of snow, but it never happened. So no precipitation. It's just very kind of cloudy and dreary outside.
Okay.
Are you in a house, Cheryl, or an
Yes.
apartment?
Yeah, I have a house here. I have a small condo in
If it
Florida.
snows, you have a little shoveling, God forbid.
We have arranged for a
sure.
company that does our lawn to do snow removal.
Thank God. Thank God. Right.
Yes, we don't get a huge amount of snow in. Whoa, what happened?
Well, I'm just I'm loading up our
Okay.
text. We're going to be looking.
We don't get that much snow in Maryland, but we can get a few big snowstorms. And it's happened at times where we've been snowed in for several days. So we'll see what happens this year.
I remember in Washington, we got some heavy snows once in a while. Wasn't often. It was like every few years.
Yes.
Yeah. So, can you see our text?
Can you make it bigger?
It's very small.
Oh, well, let me see if I can do something about that. Let me see if I can do something about that. Okay. Oh, that's good. Let me see if I can. Okay. Right. Let's see here. I can zoom it up here.
That's good.
Is that good?
That's good. That's good.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Whoops, it got smaller again.
Hold on. Let me just. No. Okay. Well. Let me see what
I can't see the whole Megillah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
so
a big Megillah.
I'll just do it this way, and that'll be fine. Okay. So Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kiddushanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I made it small again, didn't I? Let's see if I can. Okay. I want to get the whole thing in. All right. Can you see that?
A little better.
Okay. Okay.
That's good.
This is taken from Tractate Megillah or Megillah. What do you associate the word Megillah with?
Stories.
Stories, yeah. The Ganze Megillah, but in Jewish liturgical life, in the holiday cycle, when do we read the Megillah? During Megillat Esther, during Purim.
Oh, right, the Purim.
Yes.
Right, with my husband Mordecai, I should know that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So anyway, Megillah literally it just means like a scroll, and there are actually 5 Megillahs in Jewish life. They're usually on one roller, and actually most synagogues only have the book of Esther, but the book of Ruth, the book of Song of Songs, the book of Ecclesiastes, the book of Lamentations, they're all considered Megillot. They're Megillahs. Now, when they talk about the Megillah here in the Talmud, they're really talking about the book of Esther. Now, I've mentioned this a few times. Maybe you've heard it before, but it's worth repeating. The book of Esther was one of the more controversial books in the Bible. Not all of the books of the Bible came into existence at the same time and were accepted into what we would call the canon being the official number of books. There are 39 books in the Hebrew Bible. There were many more books in the ancient Jewish world, many more books. Most of them didn't get into the canon of, we call it the canon of of the Bible, and that's spelled with two N's. It's not like that boom cannon. It's not like they at the circus where they shoot the person out of the cannon. It's the canon means the official books of the Bible. So
Excuse
who
me,
decided?
Rabbi, I'm confused. I thought the Bible literally, besides the other stuff, was only 5.
No, that's the
I'm
Torah.
confusing something.
That's
What am I,
just-
what is it?
Just the Torah. The Bible, the Hebrew Bible consists of 3 parts: the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Okay. So you're right, there's only 5 books in the Torah, but
5 in the
altogether,
Torah.
if you count out the books of Joshua and Job and First and Second Kings and all of the prophets, it comes out to 39.
Oh,
Now-
all together,
Yeah.
but not
Now-
in the Torah.
But in the Torah, only 5. Now,
Okay.
so someone had to decide, someone or some persons had to decide which books were in and which books were not. There is actually a group of books from the ancient Jewish world called the Apocrypha, which literally means, it's a Greek word meaning outside of. And there are many books. Interestingly enough, this week, there are 4 books. There's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th books of Maccabee. What do you think that's about? Hanukkah, of course, didn't make it into the Bible. Not in the Bible.
Not in the Bible.
Not in the Bible. But it was somewhere, the rabbis decided not to put the books of Maccabee in the Bible. Now, Esther almost didn't make it into the Bible. Esther almost didn't. There were in a tractate Megillah. There's a discussion. We're not going to read that part of it, but we're going to read a discussion. There is a discussion of whether this is a fit book for the Bible. What about the book of Esther would make it unsuitable to be in the Bible? Think about it. Why? What was it? What were the qualities about?
Maybe some of the negativity about Haman.
Okay, explain. Go ahead. Explain, Cheryl.
Well, it's like there's a evil person that you're not wishing well to,
Yeah.
and maybe you
Uh-huh.
don't. Maybe that it could be questionable that that's appropriate to wish badly, wish
Yes.
something bad to that person.
Yeah, they may have had that in mind. At the end, all Haman and his sons get hanged, and and the Jews are,
Saved.
we're given permission by Ahasuerus to rise up in arms,
Right.
and fight Haman. Now, the rabbis who were deciding which books were getting into the Bible and which books weren't, by and large, they were living in the Roman period. And there were Jews who wanted to rebel against the Romans. Okay, and this bears on what you were saying, Cheryl. There's a lot of violence at the end of the book of Esther. The rabbis were a lot of the rabbis, at least the rabbinic establishment, was trying to keep a lid on that. They realized that to go to war with Rome was suicidal. Now, eventually, we know that the Jewish zealots won out, and it was disastrous. In the year 70, the temple was destroyed.
And
Later on, about 60 years later, during the Bar Kokhba rebellion, again, thousands of people were put to the sword, and it was not pretty. The rabbis were trying to keep a lid on the Jewish zealots, saying, wait for the Messiah to do this. Was it this great faith in the Messiah, or just a realistic assessment that, hey, we're Costa Rica, Rome is the United States of America, you know, to just to use we ain't going to win this thing, guys. This is just suicide. You know, we have faith in God, but we have to be realistic too. Now, what was the other? There are two other reasons that I can think of why the book of Esther might have been controversial to the rabbis. What else? What else?
Wasn't there, she had a connection with the king or the pharaoh there? That was part of it.
Ah, you're onto something here. Marilyn, you are onto something there. Just think about this.
That's how she got him to go against Haman, if I remember.
Yes, you know, she sort of, we
him.
find, you know, she puts him into a compromising position. I mean, really. The only way that she could get rid of him was to at least partially seduce him. The rabbis were a little prudish about this. And what is this nice Jewish girl doing in a beauty pageant?
Right.
And then not the and what is she doing marrying a Gentile?
Oh, she
Her
does
name is-
marry the king. She does marry him.
Yeah.
He picks her
Yeah,
out of all
I
the
know,
all the
but-
contestants. She's the one that he likes the best over the whole year, and she's preemed like she's, you know, one of the crew.
Yes, but is this something that a Yiddisher Mädel should do? You know, it's questionable. Plus, her name is Esther, and her uncle's name is Mordechai. The big god, the most important god in Babylonia, and also in just that part of the world, was Marduk and his consort Astarte. What does Marduk sound like? What does Astarte sound like? Does it not? Does it not sound like Mordecai and Esther? This is like a woman with the name of Christina today, and a boy with the name Christopher. You know, you do find some Jewish Christines, but it's not a very common Jewish name. Why? Because
Christ.
Right.
yeah, and and so the rabbis were probably aware of this. These were somewhat assimilated Jews in some ways. They were proud Jews in their own way, but they were intermarrying, and they were adopting names of Babylonian gods. Now, what is missing from the book of Esther? What is found in almost all of the
Rabbi,
book?
I'm confused now. You
Okay.
said Babylonia and then Rome. So Rome was part of the Babylonian Empire? Am I
No,
understanding?
Rome.
What's the connection?
It went like this. There was the Babylonian Empire. They conquered us, and they were conquered by the Persians. The Persians were pretty good friends of ours. They let us go back, although the story of Esther takes place in Persia, and later on came Rome. That's the order.
Right.
Now, Persia and Rome did have an overlap in time. I think the Babylonian Empire was pretty well spent by the time the Romans came around. There may have been some
But
remnants.
the religion was the same.
Now, let me just say, well, yeah, there were aspects of all of the religions that were similar. The Persians had Zoroastrianism, which was a little different, but
Right.
I don't want to get into that.
Right.
One thing that's missing from the book of Esther is God. God doesn't even get one mention. Aye. So you're one of the rabbis 2,000 years ago, and you got a whole bunch of books in front of you, right? And you're saying, which ones are we going to put into the canon? What's going to be the official Bible? Not just the Torah had already been decided on. Those 5 books we knew. They were in. They were in. They've been around for centuries. So you're looking at all of these books. You come across the book of Esther, And these, and listen, you're a religious person, right? And you want you're you don't want, you think Jews should be modest about their sexuality. We're not prudes, but we should be modest. We shouldn't be flaunting it. And you believe in a faith in God, and you're trying to keep down this idea that we should rebel. We should take up arms.
What about the fact that the main character is a heroine rather than a hero?
Ah, isn't that interesting
That's
too?
a good point.
Yeah, there may have been a little sexism in there. I
That's
didn't even
Good
think about
point,
that.
Cheryl,
You're
right.
right. You're right. Yes. Ah, good. Yeah,
The only
um,
one in the whole story, right?
exactly. That's good. That's excellent. So now, most scholars will say that um, it was just such a popular book. The people were aware of it. People loved Purim. It gave them great joy. And some people say the rabbi's hand was sort of forced by the people. If the rabbis had their druthers, the Book of Esther probably wouldn't have gotten into the canon. And Reform rabbis 120 years ago or so, they didn't like Purim.
Really?
The real classical Reform rabbis, they tried to some of them tried to do away with it for the same reasons the ancient rabbis didn't like it. It was too sexy, too violent. Where's God, right?
Also, what about the fact that it's celebrated by getting together and getting drunk?
Yeah, yeah.
That
And you
doesn't seem
remember,
like what you'd want to condone. I don't
yeah,
know.
just think of all of those things. And the classical Reform rabbis, they were trying to clean up the image of the Jews, and to have a whole bunch of drunken Jews on Purim, and they're trying to get accepted. They were trying to make Jews more, presentable to the world. None of this worked. But again, the Reform rabbis too, they had no choice. They had to because it was so popular. The people said, Rabbi, you ever hear that? I love this expression. You ever hear that expression, rise above your principles? Have you ever heard that expression? I imagine there was some in the ancient world, and probably here in America, 100 in the 1800s with the Reform rabbis, there were lay leaders who came to the rabbis and they said, Rabbi, rise above your principles. It's a popular holiday. It ain't going to hurt anybody too badly. Let's just do it, okay? Because the people love it. And the rabbi said, okay, do what you want. But I don't want you to, but I want to see you in shul more often, okay? I don't know, whatever they said. Okay, so what this passage in Megillah is dealing with is some of the dirty laundry, quite frankly, that we find in the Bible. The Bible is very honest about our ancestors. We had great ancestors, but we didn't, another word, canonize. In the Catholic Church, they canonize not just books, but they canonize people, making them into saints. We don't do that. We say nobody's perfect. And so the question arises, we see some pretty not nice stuff happening in the Bible. We're going to read here about Reuben. Now, you go, Reuben, that was one of the sons of Jacob. What's the big deal about Reuben? Why? You're probably saying, Rabbi, Tell what was the shameful thing Reuben did, and why don't we know about it? We don't talk about it very much because we don't talk about it. You don't hear sermons about it. Reuben was the firstborn, Jacob's firstborn, and he did not get to be the royal house. The royal house went to the fourth son, Judah. Why? Why? There's one phrase that tells us that he mounted the bed of his father's concubine. He had sex with his stepmother.
Oh.
Ay, gewalt. Ay, gewalt. You just don't do that sort of thing, right? Oh, so disgrace. So the question comes, do we read this passage out loud in the synagogue? Now, what was the custom 2,000 years ago? People will say, oh, our ancestors 2,000 years ago spoke Hebrew. They didn't speak Hebrew. They spoke Aramaic, which is related to Hebrew. It was written in Hebrew letters, but by 2,000 years ago, the people, everyday Jews were speaking Aramaic. That was the lingua franca of the Middle East. And scholars, rabbis, obviously, they didn't speak Hebrew that much, but they read Hebrew, understood Hebrew, they wrote in Hebrew. So what would happen would be you would read Torah, right? And there would be someone who would translate into Aramaic, because the average Jew didn't understand the Hebrew. And you thought that, oh, my ancestors were so learned. Some were, some weren't. And so we had someone translating. The discussion here is when reading the Bible, either the Torah or the Haftorahs, the prophets, what should you translate? Maybe you shouldn't. What should you read in Hebrew? And what should you skip over? What should you translate into Aramaic, into the language, the everyday language? Or what should you just sort of pass on it? And there are things as a rabbi, you might preach about, and certain things you would go, no, I don't know, that's rather difficult. We pick and choose things that we want to talk about. We want to upbeat. A rabbi wants to give uplift, wants to give pride in the Jewish people, right? When he's talking to the Jew, the rabbi wants you to be proud. What I just told you about Reuben wasn't very nice. What we see about King David with Bathsheba, ooh, terrible. What David did was not nice, even though he was one of God's favorites. It wasn't very nice,
He was the one from Africa, Bathsheba?
No, that was Sheba.
Oh.
Bathsheba there was a man in the Israelite army. Uriah, his name was. He wasn't even an Israelite. He was a Hittite, but he was very loyal to our people.
Oh,
he had a beautiful wife.
Remember now.
So he's away at war. King David is in his palace. He looks out the window. He sees this gorgeous woman,
right,
and one thing leads to another. Not nice. It ends up actually a murder. Uriah gets murdered. Not nice. Do we read that?
David arranged the killing of the husband.
Absolutely. Not nice. And then we have the story of one of the sons of David, Amnon. You don't know who Amnon is, probably. Amnon seduces his sister. Incest. Oy! He said, and it's terrible. It's not a nice thing. in the Torah itself, we have Judah and Tamar, the story of Judah and Tamar. What about what happened there? Tamar married two of the sons, not at the same time, but had been married to two of the sons of Judah. Both had died. And in those days, what you were supposed to do, you were supposed to marry your brother's wife if your brother died without progeny. And so it fell on Judah as the father-in-law. He actually would have been next in line. So what does he do? He ignores this, and he's off on a business trip. Tamar dresses up like a prostitute.
Oh, I remember.
Remember the story? And he stops along the way. He has relations with her, and he leaves her his staff and some identification. I'm going to come back and pay you, and it's not a nice story. In the end, he confesses and he does the right thing. Now, do we read this story or not? That is the question. So let's go to the Megillah. Let's go to the Mishnah. The incident of Reuben, Genesis 35:22, is read in the synagogue, but it's not translated. They say, read it. The rabbis will understand it, but the average Jew is not going to understand. But don't translate it, is what they say.
Does she have a baby? Right? Is a baby involved too? No?
I don't think it's mentioned.
Oh.
I'm not sure.
Oh.
The story of Tamar is read and it's translated, but we do read the story of Tamar, who seduced her in disguise, seduced her father-in-law. That we do read. That we do read. Okay. Now, the first account of the golden calf is both read and translated. The golden calf didn't put the Jewish people in a good light, but we read it and we translate it. The stories of David and Amnon are read, but they're not translated. We don't translate the story of Bathsheba. We don't translate the story of Amnon and his incestuous relationship with his sister. A portion of the, okay. Okay, now, here you got it.
Aramaic, excuse me, it's in Aramaic if you're not translating it. They don't put it into.
No, it's in Hebrew.
They don't
the Bible's
put it
written
into
in
the
Hebrew.
Aramaic for the
But
people
but
to
they
know
say
it.
don't translate. Some things you
People.
translate. Yeah, and here it says, but Rabbi Judah permits it. Rabbi Judah said this, and Rabbi Eliezer says, the portion is made known in Jerusalem, and it's not to be read as a Haftorah. It says, some of the rabbis said, you read it, the whole thing. You read everything, you translate everything. Some are not so sure. So let's go to the Gemara. I'm gonna just have to X out of this. I wonder if I can raise this up a little bit. I'm just gonna read this for you. Our rabbis taught some portions of scripture are both read and translated. Some are read, but not translated. The following are both read and translated. The account of creation is both read and translated. Certainly, you might think that when they hear it, the people are led to inquire what is above and what is below, and what is before and what is after. Therefore, we are told that this is no objection. The story of Lot and his two daughters is both read and translated. Remind me, I'll tell you what that was about. Certainly. You might think that we should not do so out of respect for Abraham. Therefore, we are told that this is no barrier to reading and translating. The story of Tamar and Judah is both read and translated, certainly. we might think that we should not translate it out of respect for Judah. Therefore, we are told this is no objection. The story really does him credit. It really does him credit. How is this? You know, because we are told he confessed.
Hmm.
That's why we would translate it. The first
Judah.
account of making the golden calf is read and translated. Certainly, you might think that we should not, out of respect for Israel. You know, we don't, our ancestors, when they worship the golden calf, why would we read that? We're not putting our ancestors in a good light. Certainly, you might think that we should, out of respect for, therefore, we are told there is no objection. To the contrary, it is agreeable to them because it is followed by atonement. It's not that they sinned. If they'd only sinned, we would say maybe we shouldn't read it. But they atoned for their sins, for the sin of the gold. Therefore, it's read, because actually it's not that we're trying to present our only the good things that our ancestors did. What they're arguing here is, okay, so some made mistakes and there doesn't seem to be any consequence for those mistakes. That we're not real proud of. But some of our people made mistakes and then they repented and they learned from them. This is what happened with Judah. This is what happened with the Jewish people in the matter of the golden calf. So you read it and you translate it. You don't want to dishearten the Jewish people, with this. You want to present. You want the Jewish people to be proud. So certainly the story of Judah and the story of the golden calf can actually do that, although it takes you down a sad road before you get to the redemption.
It
Curses.
does seem, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Well,
Go ahead.
it seems like you're keeping a lot of information from people and like kind of putting them in a place where you don't think they could maybe understand or be given the opportunity to weigh in on these things or
Yes.
something. It
Yes.
seems,
Yes.
it doesn't seem right to me, but
Yeah. Well, some of the rabbis are saying, let it all hang out. Let people make up their own minds. And there's some rabbis who go, you don't want to discourage the people. People are going to come away with such a low opinion. They're going to read part of it and they're going to go, ugh. And there would be another thing going on here. And this is something that we Jews have had to put up with over the centuries. We have all of this stuff you can read. Nobody said you couldn't read it and you couldn't study it. It was just that we read it out loud at services. That was the question. You could certainly read it.
But a lot of people wouldn't understand it or be able to read it because they didn't have that type of education or whatever.
If you were going to be reading it, undoubtedly it would be in Hebrew. You would be with rabbis, you would be with scholars, and you could process it. Also, we had by the time the rabbis were around, we had Gentile spies, looking for anything that they could use against the Jewish people. And so they would say, "Oh, look at the Jews! Look at in their own books. They show that they're not. You don't get this in other religions. In other religions, they kind of clean up. When they in the Catholic Church, I find it a little bit disturbing when they will canonize, a pope, like the Pope John Paul II is on it's on a fast track to becoming a saint. Now, there was a lot of things about John Paul II that were nice. He did some good things, bright man, but he also seemed to cover up, we're finding, the sex abuse scandals, or he didn't act on them. He knew that was happening. Would we say that his entire time the Vatican was terrible. No, he did some good things. But he also, should he be raised to the level of a saint? Should any leader be raised to the level of a saint? He wasn't so good. You had Pius the 11th,
Oh, Pius the 12th.
who knew that the Jews were being deported out of Rome. The Nazis actually had truckloads of Jews that they parked for a while outside the Vatican. He knew. Should he be a saint? People are complicated. And I think to our credit, we said in our own documents, we show that these people were messy. Our own, that we're proud of Abraham and we're proud of David and we're proud of Moses, but they were all flawed. They were real human beings. And now the question is, okay, so you can read them, but in a setting in a synagogue where you got people who you don't have time to do what we're doing now, to really discuss things, put things into perspective, do you read them out loud? Do you translate them? Some you do, some you don't. And this was the great debate as we're seeing. So let's gonna go to the next one. Whoop! I'm gonna do this. Okay, I wonder if I can.
Excuse me, Rabbi,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yes.
Weren't the popes a little responsible for the Inquisition?
Listen.
There's a connection, if I
Don't get me started.
Little?
Don't get.
Am I right? That was
Yeah.
part of behind the part of the Inquisition was the Pope.
Absolutely. This is a sore spot when I am doing, National Brotherhood Week, and I'm with, I listen, I like many of my Catholic colleagues. There's some wonderful people, but when we get into Jewish Catholic relations over the centuries, I agree with those scholars who say you can lay the demonization of the Jews over the centuries to the Catholic Church. Absolutely. And
I thought I read something about.
yeah, I certainly believe that.
There is the little matter of the Crusades too.
The Crusades,
Oh,
the
very good,
Inquisition,
Cheryl. Very good.
I remember being at the Jewish Home for the Aged in Vancouver. I guess it was in the 1970s. My grandfather was there, and my grandfather was from the Moldova part of Romania, and he had a good friend named Mr. Victor. I don't know what his first name was. I just remember Mr. Victor. And I was sitting with my grandfather and his friend Victor, and they were talking about the old country. And Mr. Victor had been in a town, maybe it was Kishinev, I'm not sure, but where one of the pogroms took place in that area. And he said he lived in like this house. It was basically 1 or 2 rooms, but a bunch, he and his parents and a bunch of kids. And he said it was Easter, and there was a pogrom against the Jews. The Jews, the killers of Christ. He said his parents got all the kids into the house, except he didn't make it into the house. They had to lock up. They didn't know where he was. So he hid kind of like under the stairs so he could see everything that was going on. And Mr. Victor described to me that there was an Orthodox priest, like a priest, from the Russian Orthodox Church, or maybe the Romanian Orthodox Church, with a cross leading a group of, terrorists, and they were killing people. They were burning down houses, and he said he quivered under the house for a day or two before he could get out. So before he could emerge and be with his family again. But can you imagine? And seeing that guy with the crucifix walking, leading, those people. I mean, and that wasn't uncommon during Easter in different places in Europe. Therefore, we're told that, okay, warnings and penalties are both read and translated. Certainly, you might think that we should forego reading for fear that the congregation will keep commandments out of fear. Therefore, we're told, therefore, there's no objection. The story of Amnon and Tamar are both read and translated. Certainly, you might think that we should not do so out of respect for David. Therefore, we are told that this offers no objection. The story of the concubines of Gibeah rather, is both read and translated. Certainly. You might think that we would not out of respect for Benjamin. Therefore, we're told there's no objection. The passage, make known to Jerusalem her abominations in Ezekiel, and translate. Certainly, this is stated to, okay. So here we have, the punchline here seems to be read it all. Cheryl? So some of the rabbis are saying, listen, they're agreeing with you. Let the people make up their own minds. When we read the whole thing, this is our history. And it's not always perfect, but you need, so they are really First Amendment people here.
And the other thing that occurs to me is atonement. If we didn't have things to atone for, what would we be doing on Yom Kippur or whatever,
Exactly. I absolutely. I think our tradition. So the punchline. I'm going to leave it here. We don't have to read anymore. The punchline here is that there is. Certainly nothing was censored by the rabbis in terms of studying it. There was a debate whether certain passages should be translated, made so that people could understand in a liturgical setting. I have this question as a rabbi sometimes. We're having a discussion about these things. We looked at some things today that are not so nice. But we can process them. If I give a 10-minute or 15 or even a 20-minute on the high holidays, I give longer sermons, explanation, and I talk about one thing, I really don't have time. I really don't have time to go into the ins and outs. I have to be careful what passages I don't know how I would preach about Reuben with his father's concubine. I wouldn't. I don't. I would. In a Bible class, I wouldn't hesitate reading it, but in a sermon, I don't know. I understand what they're saying. It's the context. You don't want to. Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question. Am I understanding that what we are talking about is really historically factual? Are they just stories, or these things that we're talking about really happened?
Well,
That's my confusion.
You know, that's a good question. I think there is a lot of there's a lot of history in the Bible. There's a lot of mythology in the Bible as well.
Right,
Uh,
right.
I think when we look, there's at least some. I don't know why our ancestors would own up to some pretty not nice stuff. I don't think they would make it up. They would say,
That's what I'm
some stuff in our
wondering.
family took place where this wasn't the best, but we're writing it in. I don't think they would, the thing about Amnon and his sister Tamar. Remember,
Yeah,
there are two women named Tamar in the Bible, the early one with Judah and this one with Amnon.
not the same Tamar, right? It's not the
No,
same.
it's two different Tamars.
Yeah, two different.
But with this, when he seduces his sister, I mean, that's disgusting. I don't know why they would make that up. I would imagine there was something to that story.
The only thing that I could think, sorry for interrupting, is in essence, it appears to me, just like we said, people are the same. And it's showing us that so many years ago, this is the way people acted, and they
Yes,
did things that weren't right. And we're
yes,
still doing things that are not right, very similar to the stories we're talking about. And
mhm,
in essence, in my opinion, is if you atone for things that you're going to possibly do that are
yes,
wrong,
yeah,
you will be forgiven. So that's my opinion of why they would put these things. So when you think of your life,
yeah,
well, look, he
yeah,
did this, my
yeah,
cousin did
yeah,
this, but he
yeah,
was sorry afterwards. So
yeah,
God will forgive you if you are sorry and atone. And
yes.
people
You
have
know,
not changed.
yes, people can be redeemed. And you think about, well, what does this mean? I see it. I belong to this extended family called the Jewish people. But what about my own family? What do I take about my own immediate family? Well, every family, um, and I don't recommend you tell your young children all of these. You don't reveal to them all of the skeletons in your family. Okay, that's probably not a good idea. But as they get older, you might say, grandfather, maybe Zeta, you know, he strayed from Bubby once. When he gets old enough that you can talk about it, they made up. It was a mistake. He should never have done that. And Uncle Joe. Wasn't always, there's that gap in the history, and maybe they're asking about it. What happened there? Well, he didn't always, he took some ethical shortcuts in his business. And, in the good Jewish families, you got sometimes people, it's mostly white collar crimes that Jews go to, but sometimes worse than that. I mean, come on, you say, well, it happened. It's not perfect, but we're a family. Uh, I I'll tell you one of my family scandals. I think it's funny. I mean, it's so long ago that it's pretty harmless, and the people are all gone. But I had a great aunt who lived in Hallandale, my Auntie Ray, and her her I was related by blood to my Auntie Ray. She was my grandmother's sister. My great aunt. She was a lovely lady. She lived out her years in Toronto, or she lived in Hallandale. She eventually, her final years were in Hallandale, but for many years she lived in Toronto. They had, I never saw it, but they had a little hotel there, and a hotel in Canada in those days was an excuse to have a beer parlor. If you had, you couldn't have, there weren't independent bars where you could just drink. You had to have some rooms, right? So, they had a few rooms and a big bar, right? And they did well. But they called it a hotel, right? So, a biography of the Bronfman family was published, I guess, in the 1970s. And my uncle, my Auntie Ray's husband, was mentioned in it. You know who Charles Bronfman was? You know,
Sounds
the
familiar.
Seagram's,
That
the
rings a bell.
Seagram's liquor.
Oh,
It's an empire. It's a billion. That family now is billions of dollars. Well,
My
the-
aunt's
the-
family is connected with Seagram's also in Wisconsin.
so let me tell you my family's connection with the Bronfmans. So my uncle, we called him Zed. I don't know why he got that nickname. He and Bronfman were rum runners.
hmm.
That's what they were doing. They were immigrant kids. In Canada, whiskey was legal. It was legal until you got to the 49th parallel. But if you could sneak across into Michigan or New York State, you could sell liquor for a lot of money. So they weren't big time people, but they were doing it. And a lot of Jews were doing this. And on this wasn't murder, it wasn't stealing or prohibition was pretty stupid. And they said, hey, if our American friends want to pay us a few extra bucks, we'll bring them down some whiskey and or whatever. But they were caught one time. This is in the book. My Auntie Ray did not know that the rest of us knew this. If we were reading the book, oh, I'm related. No, that's my uncle, right? So Bronfman was a little further along in being a bootlegger and a rum runner than my uncle. And so he said to my uncle Zed, he said, listen, it's going to be soft time. That's a few months and you got to be in some little jail in New York State. You do it and I will give you a hotel in Toronto. I'll have a place. My uncle did it. So great scandal in my family. To me, it was almost 100 years ago. To me, I think it's kind of, it's okay. He wasn't a bad guy. But, oh, geez, somebody in jail, they never talked about it. But there are a lot worse things that had happened, rapes, incest, drug addiction. Maybe we're just better off talking about it, lancing the boil, get it out there, little, what do they say? Sunshine's the best antiseptic. Lance it, get it out there. Don't put on a dad had a drinking problem. Okay, he had a drinking problem or he had a gambling problem or whatever, or a womanizer. Let's talk about it. Let's learn from it. And it's part of our story. And
Maybe it's generational thinking though, because I'm a baby boomer and we baby boomers think you should tell it all, right?
Yeah.
But
yes,
the earlier generations didn't feel that way. Some things
That's
were
right.
kept secret. So maybe it has to do with that. I don't know.
well, part of it, I mentioned before, is, the reputation of us as a group. I remember when I was growing up in Vancouver, there weren't a lot of Jews in Vancouver, maybe 6,000, 7,000 when I was growing up. If a Jew did something, we all felt it. There was, oh God, something happened in Seattle. Seattle is 120 miles from Vancouver. It's in another country, but it's fairly close. I don't know. There was a murder or something involved Jews. And it was the talk of the town in Vancouver. If it just would have been a murder, hey, hi. If it wouldn't have been a big deal. But what one Jew did affected another Jew, and you didn't want to talk about it. I think what we see in this text is a contextualization of what you talk about. Again, like I was just saying, you know, I think it's a good thing to tell our children about the whole family history, but don't do it too early. Don't do it too early. You know, a little kid can't, you know, can't deal with that. A teenager may not. Wait. You will reveal things to your kids when they're young adults that you probably, because they can't process it. What the rabbis are saying in this passage is, you know, just reading it, translating some of these more difficult passages that don't reflect well on the Jewish people or certain heroes within Jewish life in biblical times. Don't do it in a liturgical setting. Do it in a class where you can process it. I see that our friend Rachel has joined us.
Hi, Rabbi. How is everybody?
Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
I hate to do this, but we actually have a Zoom meeting scheduled at 12:30.
Oh, yes, I have to
we're
be at it.
close. We're close, right.
Okay, so I'm going to cut you loose, and I'm at
Okay.
home, Racheli.
Sounds good.
Okay, so
It's a very interesting discussion. Thank you.
okay, I'll see you next week.
Stay well, stay well.
Stay
As
well.
they said on Batman, same bat time, same bat channel.
And happy Hanukkah.
Yeah,
Happy
happy
Hanukkah,
Hanukkah.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Stay well. Bye-bye.